Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English. You can find me at www.maryenglish.com, maryenglish.co.uk and UK Astrologer. Hello. Now today I want to talk about Uranus going into the sign of Gemini, which isn't far away, and I don't think there's been enough astrological emphasis on this. As you know, or you should know, my favourite planet is Uranus. Love it. Certain signs of the zodiac don't love it. Taurus isn't loving it. I just saw somebody's social media profile today. They did a little post about Uranus being in Taurus, and this particular person is a Taurus, and you can tell they're not enjoying it, and it isn't really a planet that's happy in that sign. And I like it because I live in the city where Uranus was discovered by a chap called William Herschel in 1700 and something, can't remember the exact year. And there's a museum that commemorates him doing that, and the museum just so happens to be exactly the same address as the house that he was in when he found it, by looking up to the sky with his homemade telescope. And he was there with his sister, and his sister was called Caroline, and he was a Scorpio, if I remember right. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think he was a Scorpio, and she definitely was a Pisces, and she probably helped him. Not probably, definitely helped him. Whether or not she constructed the telescope, I don't think she did, but I do know that she spent a lot of time outside with the telescope, and she plotted various other things in the sky. Can't remember exactly, but it was something like comets but other things. So she would have been there when he discovered it, and blah 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 blah. So we have to give her credit. Anyway, getting back to Uranus. Now, with it going into the sign of Gemini, I expect Uranus, inverted commas, will be happier in that sign. And for those people that are a sun sign Gemini, they'll probably find it exciting. And I need to give you the advance notice of when it's going to happen. So Uranus finally goes into the sign of Gemini, finishes its transit in Taurus on the 8th of July 2025. So we've got less than a year away. Now it goes into Gemini. It stays in Gemini until the 6th of September. Then it retrogrades, and it goes all the way back to 0 degrees. It briefly goes back into Taurus on the 9th of November and carries on retrograding till the end of next year. So just like Pluto did a brief thing into Aquarius and then immediately retrogrades, I think it sort of happens that quite a lot of outer planets do that. I know Pluto definitely did it. So what's going to happen is that it will make this little jump into Gemini, which lasts until lasts until the 8th of November. This is 2025, so that first little skip, and then it goes back into Taurus. So next year, if you're a late degree sun sign Taurus, Mercury Taurus, you're going to have another, I would say, vibration. I had to turn the computer off, the recording off a minute ago, because there was some horrible vibration going on. And it's just like that. Uranus, when it, inverted commas, affects your chart, when it's exactly conjunct something pretty personal, like the sun, moon, ascendant, or Mercury, it doesn't affect so much Venus and Mars. It depends on your chart. Everything is personal. But Uranus is like a sort of brrrr, and it's like, where did that come from? How can I turn it off? And you can't turn it off. You can't block it out. You can only go with the energy of Uranus. Okay, so did I explain that correctly? So, we have got Uranus is going to go into Gemini next year. Now, I do know for those of you that are listening in the USA, it's quite concerning for a number of you, because I have a number of USA-based students and they're pretty much concerned, and I think I would be as well, that there's a potential that Mr. Donald Trump could be re-elected and be running the country. Now, I've already done a podcast on the part of fortune and my thoughts on that. I'm not repeating that today. What I am going to say is that whoever gets in and whatever happens, Uranus changing sign will make a massive difference, because by the time that Uranus changes sign, which is, let me give you that day again, so I'm just looking at the ephemeris and I can never remember day because I'm hardly got any brain cells, and even the ones that do function aren't that good. We got the 8th of July 2025, so Uranus goes into the sign of Gemini. Pluto now is retrograding in the sign of Aquarius, and Neptune has also changed sign. So Neptune changes sign on the, oh my lord, the 3rd, I'm going to say the 1st of April, April Fool's Day. It's not, it's 31st of March next year. So we've got, Pluto's already done it, it's now in an air sign. Neptune's been in water for so long. I'm going to be sad when that finishes. It's going to go into Aries, and then a little while later Uranus joins suit, and that's in air as well. So we're going to have 2 air planets, and we're going to have 1 fire planet, and those are the outer planets. So trust me, if you think things are going quickly at the moment, when we get to next year, and it's end of March 2025, it's not far away, things are going to go really fast. So we have to remember that Uranus, Neptune and Pluto are outer planets, only recently discovered. It was only the first one was only discovered in 1700 and something, which I know isn't yesterday, but it is, you know, this side of Jesus being born. So I know ancient astrologers didn't use them, and if you're a medieval astrologer, you're not even going to take them into account, and I think that's sad. I do love ancient astrologers and astrology. We cannot ignore the outer planets. They just are reflective of so much that's happened to us. Get reading Richard Tarnas's book Cosmos and Psyche, and you have a much better understanding. I think I've read that about 50 times. So what is it going to be like when Uranus goes into Gemini? Now just think about Mr. Donald Trump and what he is like as a person, because he was born with the Sun and Uranus conjunct. I'm not going to go into his chart, I'm not going to bother you with it, but just to let you know that I have mentioned it millions of times before, he's somebody with the Sun and Uranus conjunct in that sign, and we can see how his life goes. There's no planning there whatsoever, zero planning, it's just reactive. So I wouldn't say it was particularly positively reactive, but there we go, reactive. Now certain signs of the zodiac cope better with Uranus. Generally speaking, the air signs and the fire signs can cope with it better. The earth and water signs, depends what else is going on in the chart, can find it tricky. So today we're going to look at, obviously we're looking at 3 charts. We're going to look at 3 charts, 3 people, a little bit about them, and they were, because we're not discovering Trump, I'm fed up with him, we're going to be talking about 3 people that were born Sun conjunct Uranus. I think 2 of them are dead. I'll double check in a minute. One of them isn't. Because obviously Uranus doesn't go into the sign of Gemini every day of the week. It's every 80 something years. It's a 84-year or 85-year cycle that a planet stays in a sign. And I wanted to look at the charts of people that were born with that, because you can do mundane astrology, lots of people do mundane, and we're talking about things, but I understand transits better by seeing, understanding, feeling, hearing about people's actual lives, because to my mind, if astrology is not helping us as humans, then it's pretty useless. Because myself, I'm born with Sun in the 7th house, it's always bringing it down to a personal level. And because this is a slightly longer podcast, because I want to bash the point home about this planetary change, we're also going to look at the transit rhythmogram for the UK and also the USA. So I will do those after I've done the personal charts of the 3 people that we're going to just briefly consider. Now, the first person we're going to look at is a guy called Ted Kaczynski. He was born on the 22nd of May 1942 at 6:45 a.m. Chicago, Illinois. And I obviously am using data from Astro Data Bank, and I've got his natal chart, and I'm sure he's no longer with us. Let me double check. Yes, he died in June 2023, so he's only recently died. Anyway, we've got a natal chart here. So I think this is a classic example of someone who's got a challenging chart and they haven't done anything to fix that themselves. So we've got no self-awareness here whatsoever. So he's a guy called, I say, Ted Kaczynski, and he was born... I'm going to repeat myself now. So it says in his biography on Astro Data Bank, which might be different to what it says on Wikipedia, but I'm not sure about. So, American mathematician, domestic terrorist called the Unabomber or the Unabomber between 1978 and 1995. Kaczynski murdered 3 individuals and injured 23 others in a nationwide mail bombing campaign against people he believed to be advancing modern technology and the destruction of the natural environment. He was taken into custody on the 3rd of April 1996 with overwhelming evidence of his guilt. Says here he was a gifted child but was shy and aloof as an infant. He was hospitalised for several weeks, and hospital staff discouraged the parents from visiting their child and prevented them from holding him in their rare visits. He reportedly was never the same. He excelled at school, skipping 2 grades and graduating at age 16. He obtained his bachelor's degree from Harvard University in 1962 with a major in mathematics. Dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum. In May 1978, a bomb was sent to a professor. What else did he do? A person who was then called the Unabomber sent a letter to the New York Times proclaiming that an anarchist group was responsible. Additional people were killed by these bombs. And he mailed several letters to former victims, also known as the Manifesto. I mean, he's completely not a normal person. Was an active writer in prison. What did he do? Including carbon copy replies, legal documents, publications, clippings. The names of most correspondents were kept sealed until 2014. He also battled in the federal court in Northern California over the auction of his journals and other correspondence. His cabin was removed and stored in a warehouse in an undisclosed location. It was to be destroyed, but eventually given to the Charlotte Holtman, an investigator of Kaczynski's defence team. David, Theodore's brother, who turned him into the FBI, never received a response to the monthly letters he sent Theodore in prison as of 2007. In 2010, a collection of his essays and a corrected version of Manifesto was published by Feral House under the title Technological Slavery. On the 24th of May 2012, Kaczynski submitted his current information to Harvard University Alumni Association. He listed his 8 life sentences as achievements, his current occupation as prisoner, and his current prison address. Then in 21, when he was 79, he was transferred from the Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, to the Federal Medical Center in Butler, North Carolina, for health reasons. And then at 12:23 a.m. on the 10th of June 23, emergency workers were called to his cell. Workers attempted to revive him in prison and in an ambulance were unable to do so, and he was pronounced dead at the age of 81 at hospital, and officials believed he killed himself. So we got somebody who isn't particularly normal here for whatever reason. And let's have a look at the chart. Okay, so we've got a Gemini ascendant, which is 20-something degrees, 21 degrees Gemini. His sun sign is Gemini, and his sun sign is 0 degrees, and his Uranus is 0 degrees as well. Because Astro Databank, when you ask it, because I'd asked it to give me people that were sun in Gemini, sun conjunct Uranus, and Uranus in the sign of Gemini. So sun in the sign of Gemini, Uranus in the sign of Gemini, and sun conjunct Uranus. So this was a person that was born just when Uranus went into the sign of Gemini last time. So in this particular case, his birthday is the 22nd of May 42. I haven't looked at 1942's ephemeris, but we know his Uranus is 0 degrees 26 minutes. So he's only just done it, and then bing, this chap's born. And his sun sign is sandwiched between Saturn's 1 degrees Gemini, and he's got a Gemini ascendant, and he's got Mercury in Gemini, and he's got Jupiter in Gemini. He's got pretty much a Gemini stellium, whilst his Mars is in Cancer, and then he's got Pluto, Chiron, and the Moon in Leo. So he's got, is the Moon conjunct? Moon's not conjunct Pluto, but it ain't far away. It's in the same sign. It's in his second house. And then his Neptune's retrograde in the sign of Virgo, and his Venus is in Aries in the 10th house. So are we looking at the chart of, well, we're definitely looking at the chart of somebody who's mentally not quite there, and his Mercury's right on the ascendant. And then we have to ask the question, is it nature or nurture? Well, I couldn't answer that either. What I can tell you is this is someone whose life is going to be, and was, erratic, because the side effect of Uranus is stuff that is erratic. Now, erratic isn't necessarily in and of itself a bad thing. And I was talking to a Gemini friend of mine the other day, and they've just retired, and they were saying that they couldn't concentrate in anything at the moment. I was thinking, need to be a butterfly. In fact, if you're listening and you're finding concentrating difficult, please get in touch with me, because the last homeopathic remedy I made was made from a butterfly called the Painted Lady. And I already knew that the butterfly remedies, homeopathic butterfly remedies, were developed, and particularly developed by a doctor in France. And she was a psychologist as well as being a psychiatrist, I think, as well, and a homeopath. And she prescribed them a lot for people. And the key words for butterfly, don't worry, I'm going to make sense in a minute. Butterfly, energy, people that need it as a remedy are born with difficult childhoods, because in real life the mother butterfly lays her eggs and buggers off and leaves the little eggs and the caterpillars to do their own thing. So it's children whose childhoods resulted from not enough care, nurturing and attention. And then the other side to it, she gave the remedies, quite a lot of remedies, to the types of children that she was working with, ones with a diagnosis of ADHD, ADD, etc. So if I was looking at this in a homeopathic consultation, I'd go, ooh, that would be what you need, is butterfly. Because if you just read just 2 minutes worth of this man and his history, it's bing here, bing there, bing bong bong, bing bing. There's not a single thing that is consistent in his life whatsoever. Nothing. The consistency just doesn't happen. And equally, he doesn't have anything in the sign of Taurus. He doesn't have anything in the sign of Scorpio, which are sort of constant, consistent signs. Capricorn, got nothing in Capricorn either. So he's, and when I'm sharing this chart on the show notes, if you look at it, cardinal, fixed, mutable, he's got 2 cardinal planets. He's got 2 fixed, one of which is his moon in Leo and Pluto in Leo, and then mutable, everything else is mutable. bing, bong, bing, 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 bing. And that's the nature of the butterfly. But why would a butterfly want to sit about for any length of time? They'll die. They'll get eaten by something. So if you've ever noticed, there's different types of butterflies, don't get me wrong, but the majority of them need to be in the sun and bump about the place. So when we did the proving, which is a homeopathic trial, what happened to the poor people that were taking it, their lives suddenly became bing bong, bing bong, and they were just bouncing all over the place doing stuff. And one of the people in particular who I met at the astrological conference this year, who is a sun sign Gemini, I already knew that, and I met him again. He was one of the provers. We just literally bumped into each other and he recognised me, and I had not seen his face because we'd tried to communicate online and the camera didn't work and all the rest of it. Anyway, long story short, he said he's a particularly erratic person anyway, and he couldn't, afterwards when the proving stopped, couldn't believe how erratic he got. He literally was jumping on aeroplanes and spending days in places and then getting on another airplane and going somewhere else. So this is what the energy of Uranus is all about. And when it's in Gemini, in a sense, because there's a spectrum of everything, Uranus in Gemini is not settled, it's not whatever. So the only thing a person can do is to flit from one thing to another like a butterfly. Okay, so in a domestic setup, that person would need to live with someone who's going to remember to do the shopping, who's going to remember anything, if you're born with that as a natal signature. I did have a quick look to see where the planets were when he passed, and Uranus had gone into the sign of Taurus and wasn't conjunct to his sun sign because he's only recently died. But it's within orb. So he didn't wait to live until he had Uranus return. I think on the date that he died, if I remember rightly, the moon and Saturn were conjunct in the sign of Pisces, which would have formed a square to his natal Saturn, which is in that sign. Okay, so that's Ted, who obviously somebody somewhere was calling him Theodore. So second example here is a guy called Pierre. And he was, hold on, let me double check. I think he died on the 15th of February 2005. Anyway, his name's Pierre Bachelet. Come on, French people, let me know how to pronounce that. Pierre Bachelet was born the 25th of May 1944, and he was a musician. What's his official job title? So he's a French singer-songwriter and film score composer. He was also known as Andrew Baxton. So he's got a Leo ascendant, Pluto right in the ascendant, Pluto conjunct Mars, and I don't think Pluto conjuncts Jupiter, does it? Pluto doesn't conjunct Jupiter, but they're all pretty near to his ascendant. It's in Leo. A Gemini can manage with a Leo ascendant. And the sun, this is very similar to Trump's chart actually. The sun's conjunct Uranus in the 10th, and Venus is in Taurus. And what I thought was very much another Uranus thing, it says he was married 3 times. His first son Yannick was born on the 7th of February 1964. After his first divorce, he married Danielle Bachelet. He had a second son, Quentin, and his second marriage lasted 24 years. After that divorce, he married Francois, the sister of Danielle. So I believe that was his sister. So he married the sister of his first wife, who he divorced. After his first divorce, he married Danielle, had a second son. After that divorce, he married the sister of the woman he divorced. That's weird, but that could be moon in Cancer. That does happen. I probably told this story about the lady that I was working with, and she is a Cancer, and she lived next door to her partner, and they dated and did the thing and all the rest of it, and then they split up. She divorced him, and then she started dating his brother, and his brother was still in the house next door. So that can happen to Cancer. So he was a musician, he was successful, he did some songs, he wrote some stuff, and the Sun and Uranus are definitely conjunct. When he died, I was looking at what was going on. Uranus had just recently entered the sign of Pisces. Pluto was opposition in the sign of Sagittarius. I can't remember what was happening. Did I first talk that open? No, I haven't. But two outer planets that I noticed. Pluto was opposition to his sun sign in the sign of Sagittarius, and Uranus had gone into Pisces, so it formed a square. Now, the other thing to remember is that Uranus has been in a fixed sign for the last umpteen years. It's now going to go into a mutable sign. So whatever sign it's in, if whatever quality your planets are, it is going to affect you. So not directly. If you're not actually a Gemini, Uranus transiting through that sign won't affect you directly if you're not Gemini. However, if you are Pisces, Sagittarius or Virgo, it will, because you'll get the aftershocks. You know, like you have an earthquake and then there are aftershocks after this, the same type of idea. So you need to, if you're of those signs, start preparing now and thinking, well, what am I going to do if I don't know, my house gets destroyed in an earthquake? I'm exaggerating now. But keep in your mind worst case scenario things, because if you can predict what Uranus does, then you're not understanding the unpredictability of Uranus, and people that are born with it are unpredictable. So this man, Pierre, he's married more than once. That's not unheard of for Geminis. The two signs of the zodiac that marry and remarry the most are statistically Gemini and Pisces. You can Google it if you don't believe me. And if you're ever been on a dating site, the two signs of the zodiac it will be flooded with will be Geminis and Pisces. And I am a Pisces with moon in Gemini, so I know what I'm talking about. So that's Ted and that's Pierre. Now the last person you will have heard of, and this is Gladys Knight, the singer. She was born on the 28th of May 1944. She was born at 7:52 p.m. in Atlanta in GA, I think that stands for Georgia, but don't quote me, I'm not that good on it. She's got a fabulous one-sided chart and a Sagittarius Ascendant, which I'm sure Oprah Winfrey's got a Sagittarius Ascendant, 99% sure. She has got Sun in Gemini. She has got Uranus in Gemini, and the Sun is 7 degrees 31 and Uranus is 8 degrees 50. That's as conjunct as you can get it. I've done a chart for the 9th of July 2025 just to see for her where the planets will be when Uranus goes into the sign of Gemini for that first day next year, 9th of July 2025. I'm not making any predictions. I'm just telling you that that's the date that it'll go and what would it look like in her chart. Mercury will be in Leo. She's got some Leo planets. The Sun will be in Cancer, Jupiter being Cancer, Saturn will have gone into Aries, so Saturn's changing sign next year. Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, how horrific. So actually next year we've got Saturn in Aries, Uranus in Gemini, Neptune in Aries and Pluto in Aquarius. Nothing's going to be nailed down. We haven't got outer planets in any earth signs. Jupiter's going to spend a year in Cancer, but water will sort of slow it down a bit. So she was born with a Sagittarius Ascendant, Sun and Uranus conjunct in the 6th, and she's got Moon in Leo, which is in the 9th, because the ruler to her chart is Jupiter. Jupiter's in her 9th, is conjunct the Moon. That's lucky, that's nice. And she is, as far as I'm aware, she's still alive. She's a best-selling singer, and she's had an amazing life. And I personally, this is only my personal opinion, I think she's lived her Uranus and made, inverted commas, the best of it. She has had tragedy. She has had miscarriages, been in trouble financially. She's had lots of things happen with her and to her, and she started singing at the age of 4, which is very young. So she spent her whole life in the musical world, so obviously she's, inverted commas, used to it. But from where I'm sitting, I think this is someone that has done very well with their Uranus sun sign conjunction. Maybe because the sun's in the 6th house, that slowed things down a bit because that's an earth house. And in addition, she also has her Mercury in the sign of Taurus, so she's already under the influence of Uranus because it's already transiting through the sign of Taurus. And the Pierre chappie that we were looking at a minute ago, the musician, he had natal Mercury in the sign of Taurus, which I would consider probably a helpful thing. That Ted bloke had everything in Gemini, including his Uranus, which I don't think particularly helped him. Now, Gladys has got less than a bowl chart. She's got planets, so houses-wise, we've got 1, 2, 3, I'm counting that right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She's got 7 empty houses, not 6. And her Neptune's just 1 degree into the sign of Libra. So signs of the zodiac she hasn't got is Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces and Aries. So that's 1, 2, 3. Mary can't count 6. But she's very much got a bold chart. She's got Saturn in the 7th. Which is also in the sign of Gemini. Maybe that's helped her. I don't know, if we're classifying things as helpful or unhelpful, challenging or not challenging. She has got Pluto conjunct Mars, and they say the realist of her chart is Jupiter, and her Jupiter is located in the 9th, which astrologically is a happy thing. Whilst in Pierre's chart, he's got a Leo ascendant and the sun is in the 10th. That's not his natural home. And the Ted bloke has got a Gemini ascendant with Mercury, the ruler, and Mercury's on the ascendant. So he could have been a spokesperson, he could have written, and he could have written things that weren't as aggressive. And actually, a while ago, I don't know what podcast number it was now, you have to look back, I did when Uranus first went into Taurus, because I've been doing this podcast a long time, since 2016. When Uranus first went into the sign of Taurus, I was covering the chart of the guy that started Extinction Rebellion, and he started that when Uranus went into the sign of Taurus, because he's a Taurus, and that sparked him off to the journey that he's made, which is to shake things up and cause disruption, and that's the energy of Uranus. And if that wasn't an earth sign manifesting the energies of Uranus, I don't know what is. Now, what will happen to him, inverted commas, question mark, when Uranus goes out the sign of Taurus is, I don't know. And I think at the moment he's in prison. Luckily he hasn't killed anybody or done anything nasty, but he's stopped lots of traffic and climbed up things and encouraged other people to protest. So I'm not making any comment on that. Okay, so this is just a little snippet of what it's like to be born with Uranus conjunct the sun in the sign of Gemini, because Uranus is going to start its transit next year, and we need to, trust me, we need to prepare for that. Nothing will be nailed down. So if you want a dose of the butterfly remedy made from the Painted Lady, which is a very nice butterfly because it goes all over Europe. It's born in Morocco. It starts its journey, which can take up to, I can't remember now, days. It starts its journey in Morocco and eventually ends up in the UK, crossing all the way through Europe to get to the UK. Does it every year. This is a cycle. It's the most amazing butterfly. You have got a version of it in the US. It's a different variety of the butterfly, and there's also another variety of the butterfly that hangs around in Australia and New Zealand, because I had provers that were taking the remedy dotted all over the bloody place. But that particular butterfly makes this wonderful journey all the way to UK, which is almost unbelievable because it travels at 25 miles an hour. It's a teeny weeny little thing. It's as light as a feather, and people say, it's blown by the wind. It isn't. Their wings are so strong that they can fly that distance, and sometimes they can do it in just one journey, and sometimes they stop over depending on the weather conditions. and how strong they're feeling. They'll land in parts of Europe and have something to nosh, and then they get back on their journey again. They come to the UK, they stay here for the summer, only for the summer, and then off they go again back to Morocco. And you think, if that isn't the most amazing form of migration, this is a tiddly-widdly little insect, I don't know what is. But just to point out, if you'd like a few doses of it to help you if you've got a brain that is more flippy floppy than mine. Well, mine's flippy floppy, but if you've got no concentration, luckily I have very good concentration, but if you've got no concentration and you're feeling all over the bloody place, then do get in contact. So now we're going to look at the UK's chart, transit rhythmogram wise, and the USA, and to see when is Uranus going to affect those two countries. Now, as I said before, the date that I used for the United Kingdom was when it was named the United Kingdom, which was the 12th of April 1927, and it was at 12 o'clock midnight is the time that I've used, and I've had Wikipedia help me with that. The USA's date of birth is when the USA was named the USA, not when it was created or when they signed all the bits of paper or whatever, but this is the naming of it. And I've used 12 noon because I don't know what time they made their decision, but I'm sure it's not first thing in the morning, last thing at night like it was in the United Kingdom, because in the United Kingdom things that this is 12 o'clock midnight, like early in the day. In the UK, things become legal first thing in the morning of the first day of the thing, so like early in the morning, that's the law thing. So USA I've done 12 a long time, but the date is the 9th of September 1776. So let's look at the UK first, and we're just looking at the transit rhythmogram, and it tells us that Uranus will be into the sign of Gemini, which I've said already happens next year. Did I say it was June or July? Because it's coming up in the transit rhythmogram as July next year. So this is why my brain doesn't retain information. Uranus literally goes in for that first little thing on the 8th of July. July next year, and it points it out there, and then that gives it a sextile to the natal Uranus of the chart. So Uranus doesn't do much to the UK next year when it finally changes sign. What it's doing at the moment is it's forming squares to the natal of the UK, squares to the natal moon, Neptune, it's conjuncting its natal Venus and natal sextile to the natal Mercury. But if you look at the leaps and the the peaks of Uranus, it's actually affecting the UK at the moment. Then it settles down until we get to 2026, and then Uranus makes enormous peaks. So we've just got a new 2028, big one. We've got a new political party at the moment. We've got the Labour Party, they're doing their thing at the moment. The Conservatives, which is the opposition party, have just appointed a new leader. Her child's a nightmare. And so what's going to affect the Uranus? What's going to affect the UK the most in the coming years? And I could safely say that Uranus is already doing its thing at the moment and probably won't impact the UK until we get to 2028, because the peaks aren't big. It's affecting us at the moment, Neptune, because that's going to change sign, will be directly conjunct to the UK Uranus. So Neptune transiting directly conjunct to UK Uranus in March next year. Don't think that's very fun. And transiting Pluto, because Pluto's now just going into the sign of Aquarius, it's telling me that it's sextile to the natal Uranus. And then Pluto's going to trine to the MC. But looking at the overall busyness of this, I'd say 2026 for the other planets as well is probably more active in the UK. But when we get to 2028, that just doesn't look particularly fun at all. That's very active. Okay. So USA, and obviously I've got no idea who gets elected. I've already said my bit a few weeks back. Uranus isn't doing too much as far as the USA goes. It doesn't do anything until 2026, so the first bit of it transiting through the sign of, let me check I've got the right transits on there. Hold it 1 minute. Yeah, I just had brief, I was thinking, I've got the right dates in there, because I've got 2024, beginning of 24 up until the end of 28. So Uranus doesn't affect the country itself until 26, so the end of 25, the beginning of 26. The planet that's most affecting the USA at the moment now looks like Neptune, opposition natal Mercury. Transiting Neptune is opposition natal Mercury. The peaks happen 26 is very active, so the end of 25, beginning of 26, there's a hell of a lot going on. And then Pluto does its thing in 2027. Now, obviously, the USA and the UK aren't people, so you need to get your chart and look at the 9th of July next year. So this is when when a planet first goes into a sign, that's like you wake up one day, you're one thing. You wake up the next day, you're not the same at all. And being prepared for these things is good, because it means that you know what to happen when all the shit hits the fan. And as I said, you can't predict with Uranus, because if you can, then we're not talking about Uranus, but just hoping today you've got a vague idea of the energy of how it works, and how I personally think it's important for us as astrologers to be coaching our clients, especially if they've got something that Uranus is going to exactly smack into. I moved to this house where I am now during a Uranus transit. So in my case, when Uranus was going through the sign of Pisces, the change that happened was my domestic situation, which was what I wanted. I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to move from where I was. This was all stuff I wanted to do, and I was happy to do it. It is going to, when it gets to Gemini, Uranus into the Gemini, it's going to affect the other mutable signs. So I'm sure listen to me, I'm talking to you now, you'll have something mutable in your chart. Consider what Uranus is going to do, and also those two other outer planets are going to be changing sign, Neptune and Pluto. So we've got a hell of a lot of activity next year. So this year, what I'd advise you to do is relax, because next year is going to be busy. So do ping me an email if you'd like to. Trial's the wrong word. We've already done the trial for the Painted Lady Butterfly Remedy. But if you think you'd benefit from it and you'd like to try a few doses and to feed back to me if you felt better. So this is not the trial. I've done the trial. We know what it does. This is in as a healing capacity. No guarantees. No money back, whatever, but I will post you a few doses of the remedy and you can try it out and see if you benefit from it, because I need feedback now for this particular remedy. It's been sat in my office and I haven't prescribed it much to people, but I would like, before I finish my homeopathic practice, whenever that is, I'd like to get some feedback for people that are using it in a healing capacity. So I have prescribed it to a few clients, but I haven't prescribed it enough to know if it will help that type of energy that's within the person, where they're like the butterfly, can't settle, up and down, which is fine if you have a job or a type of lifestyle that you need to live like that. But assuming that you don't and you're fed up with it now, I say ping me an email. And also ping me an email if you've got your opinion on what Uranus in Gemini is going to be like for you, and you've probably experienced already because you've got some planet somewhere that does something that's been squaring or conjuncting or whatever. So I hope you have a fab week. Hope that made sense, by the way, and I'll speak to you next week. Bye bye now.